Hi there. So recently I did a cover of All These Feelings by Vildhjarta, and I thought it sounded alright, and a few people thought it sounded pretty good, so I wanted to go over what I did in the mix for this, and go over some of the guitar tone stuff. Now, a couple of disclaimers, I don't have any of the stuff that Vildhjarta uses, like any of the guitars, like amps or whatever. So this isn't how to replicate their sound using their stuff. This is just my take on their type of guitar tone and how I go about getting that sound. And same thing with the mixing. I don't mix it the same way they do. This is just what I did. So let's get into it. Yeah. First of all, I did all the mastering in the session. So I'm just gonna turn off all that mastering real quick. And I guess we'll just start with the rhythm guitars. Let me just kind of turn off the effects on these rhythm guitars real quick. So that's what they sound without any processing. And then I'm gonna throw everything I did on top and see what that sounds like now. So let me go step by step what I did. Let me just get one of these, the left track, I'll just get that one and pan it center so you can listen to that tone. So I used archetype nollie for this. I used the 3rd amp, 4th cab. That's usually the type of thing I do for this type of tone. I think the mics I used were just like, yeah, 421 and the 414. That's usually what I like to do. You can see my settings here, you know. Compressor, overdrive with a lot of treble, no bass, and you bring the bass back with the preamp on the amp. Now, what's important for this tone is I did some EQ before the amp. Because if you listen to my tone, it's kind of dark. It's really, it doesn't have a lot of top end. So I brought in some, like, I don't know, 1600 and 4000 hertz. Makes it a lot more present. So I did that, I kind of got rid of some of the highs with the low pass. And then let me just switch through so you can hear what it sounds like. That's without the EQ. So it sounds a little bit closer to their tone when you put the EQ on there. Then after that, I did a multi-band compressor. What I did with this is just kind of compressed a lot of the low end and then brought it back up. And it just keeps it a little bit more consistent. Every time I do those chugs, it kind of like dips and compresses, but without the multi-band. Okay, and then with the multi-band. Cool. I like the way the multi-band kind of makes it sound a little bit more full. And then got a little EQ after that where I just kind of brought up some 80 hertz, kind of bringing back some of the low end, dipped a little 200, but I think it makes a good difference. It's about the EQ. And with the EQ. So let me show you what that sounds like in the mix. Okay, let me show you that without the effects, just the amp sound. So yeah, basically, depending on how your pickups are, just do a little bit of EQ before the amp, kind of bring up the presence range, like 2K, 5K. And that usually helps out a bit to give it that like twangy sound. And then on top of that, I have this distorted rhythm guitar bus where I did some EQ on everything. So again, more 5K, a little bit of 10K, you know. And I did another multi-band compressor. Again, just makes it like nice and punchy and full. Cool. So I think we understand the rhythm guitars pretty well. I'll move on to the bass. So for the bass, it gets complicated. I don't even know what all I did. I know the main thing is, let me just solo the amp. The amp is the free amp that comes in Amplitude 5. That's just what I like for my bass tone. I think it sounds nice. The bass is tuned an octave below the guitars, so it's really, really deep. Okay, so that's just with the amp. And then I have the Neural DSP Dark Glass Ultra plugin. I just did some EQ. I didn't have the distortion turned on. I don't like the way it sounds. It's mainly just to have the gate and a little bit of EQ. And then more EQ before the amp. Just making it like really, really low end heavy, scoop some 200. Another EQ after the amp. I don't know, all sorts of scooping going on in the mids and bringing out that top end. Then I compressed the heck out of it with one of the FET compressors. Then a multi-band compressor, you know. Again, compressing the low end, like low mids, just to kind of keep it kind of consistent. And I also like it for the bass because like multi-band compressors can be good for scooping out frequencies without just like going in with an EQ, because you don't have to turn up after you compress. You can just like what I did at the like 200 hertz range is I just compressed, and every time 200 hertz gets like a little too loud, it just compresses. So it just kind of, it's a nice way to scoop it without getting too messy. And then I did a little exciter at the end, because in the original recording there was like a little bit of that like sparkle on the bass, because I don't know, it's tuned really low and you can hear it like slapping against the frets and stuff, so I decided to bring that out more with this. I think that makes a big difference personally, because like over the guitars you're not going to hear a lot of the mids and the bass, it's just going to be the very low end. So let me just solo bass and guitars with all the processing. So yeah, that's the rhythm guitars and bass. I guess at this point I'll just quickly go over the ambient guitars I got, the clean ones. I didn't use an amp for any of the clean guitars. It's just all sorts of weird processing, I don't know. Let me just choose this first one, I guess. So first of all, I knew I was gonna have to bring up a lot of high end. So I used the Isotope RX8 voice denoiser. Works pretty well on guitars actually. So here's with all the processing but no denoising. There's a lot of noise in there with the denoiser. Cool. Let me just turn off everything. This is what the DI sounds like with no processing. Kind of pathetic. So there's a lot of processing going on here. We got one EQ that's just boosting the heck out of the high end. Got an exciter after that. And the compressor. This is a slower compressor, so it doesn't quite stomp on the transients. And we got a multi-band compressor to make the top end consistent. It helps out because my performance wasn't like perfect, you know. And then, because I did some compression stuff and I wasn't picking super hard, I put an enveloper plugin on there to add some more pick attack. And then a stereo delay. And then I did technically use an amp sim plugin on this. I used Archetype Gojira, or Gojira, I don't know why I said it like that, but I didn't actually use any of the amp stuff. I just used the reverb pedal because I like the way the shimmer sounds on it. I think that sounds really nice. And then just another little EQ after the reverb. I guess I just needed more mids and a little bit more top end. So let's listen in the mix. What does it sound like with no processing in the mix? You might not even be able to hear it. And all the processing. Cool, that's what the ambient guitars basically do. Pretty much all the ambient guitars have the same processing done to them, just maybe slightly different. The only one that's a little bit different is like the finger style one. That track that's supposed to sound a little bit more like an acoustic guitar, I guess. I did a little bit different EQ to that one. I guess I brought up a little bit more of the mids than I did in the other ones. And then I also took them away later. I don't know. Let's just listen to that one with no processing and then the processing again. It's also worth noting I used a different reverb for this one. I used Native Instruments ROM. This one's pretty good. It doesn't have the same like shimmer that the Archetype Gojira pedal has, so it works better for this. Okay, now on to the drums. The drums are my favorite part. I love mixing drums. I have a lot of fun with it. So I'm just gonna turn off all the processing on the kick. Let's listen to the kick. So I used, for the drums, I used Get Good Drums, Modern and Massive. I think the kick I used was the Pearl kick, and the snare I used was I don't know what I used. It might have been the Bell Brass High Tuned snare. Probably that one, I don't know. But here's the kick with no processing. So on the kick sum channel, which I had it named incorrectly. This is kick sum. On this one, I scooped 200, kind of got rid of some of the low end, you know. Cool. And then brought up some of the fundamental in the kick sub channel and scooped some 200. Then I put those into a bus for just the kick and did a lot of compression on it, like 4-to-1 ratio. Then I did some multiband. So this changes the sound of the kit quite a bit. It really tightens the low end up. Let me just solo the low end multi-band compression. In my opinion, it makes it nice and punchy. So, and again, like I was talking with the bass, on 200, I didn't like boost it after I compressed. I just let it scoop whenever 200 got too loud. So I like the way that sounds. I think it sounds cleaner than just going in there with an EQ and doing like way too much. Yeah, and then after that I used an expander. I always use this preset on this expander. I just go to the more punch setting, which just really it's almost a gate at that point. Like it's so drastic, but I like the way it sounds. So here's without the expander. And there's with the expander. I think that sounds really good. I like how punchy it is. And then, you know, some more scoop and shenanigans. Cool. That's what everything sounds like soloed on the kick. I'll just move over to the snare real quick. I did quite a lot to the snare. So here's a snare with no anything. Just let me turn off that reverb. Okay. That's just the snare. Cool. Did EQ on the snare top. There was that like ringing frequencies. I got rid of that. Not too much though. Didn't do a whole lot. And then on the snare bottom channel, I brought out a lot of the low end because I like the way the low mid sound on the bottom mic. Then I multi-band compressed the snare bottom. At this point, I think I have it set to expand, yeah. So at 100, 200, around that range, I'm doing expansion, not just compression. So every time it hits, I'm actually boosting the low mids on that, and I think it makes it sound a lot thicker. And then you'll see later how that starts sounding really nice, because on the snare channel where I have both the snare top and bottom going too, I did some multi-band, you know, compressing the low end and bringing it up a lot, and some other compression, but it's mostly there to make the low end really consistent. Nice compressor, not too fast. And EQ, kind of taking out some of the top end of that low mid, because I really just want 200, like the fundamental area, to get kind of boosted. And then I got rid of a lot of the 2K. I'm starting not to like super bright snares anymore, so I get rid of a lot of that presence. Then I used an exciter to bring up the very tippity top end at 14,000 hertz. And then again, there's expander. I used the high expansion preset on this one and kind of adjusted a little bit. But it just stops it real quick. It's basically a gate. But I like the way that sounds. If you like use an expander to keep the snare really tight and then put some reverb on it, I love the way that sounds. And then I used an enveloper to kind of, because I did some compression and expansion. I want to make sure the transient's nice and present. A little bit of EQ to bring out the very top end. So here's the snare with no processing. And then here's the snare with processing. Cool. I don't really feel like going over the toms too much. I just did some multi-band, just some normal tom shenanigans. I did a little EQ on the cymbals, but nothing too crazy. It's more the kick and snare that I was worried about. And then on the drum bus, which all the kick, snare, and everything is getting sent to, I put the console EQ plugin on here, bring up a little top end, gives it a nice warm sound, you know? A little bit EQ, again, like I don't want the drums to be too present, I want the guitars to kind of dominate, so taking out a little bit of the 2K, 5K. Did some overall compression on the drum kit. You know what that sounds like. The compressor's there mainly just for the kick and snare. Just kind of, I like doing this kind of little bit of compression on the kick and snare on the drum bus channel so that it brings out the cymbals more whenever the kick and snare aren't playing. But you don't want to go overboard with it. So I'm at -13 for my threshold, but like if you bring the threshold like way down, like the cymbal pumping is like crazy. I don't like the way that sounds. Some people do that. I personally don't like it, so just a little bit of that pumping sounds cool to me. And then I put a dynamic EQ at the very end just because, I don't know, a little bit of the top end was, or the presence range was a little too much for me, but that's the drums. So I'm gonna show you the entire mix with none of the processing. So let's see what that sounds like real quick. All right, let me just pick a section real quick and we'll just listen to that with no processing. Maybe I'll choose the ending section. So that's what the ending section sounds like with no processing on the guitars, bass, or drums. So I'm gonna turn all that back on so you can hear what it sounds like when I've done all the mixing and all that shenanigans. All right, here's what it sounds like with all the processing. Cool. So that's what it sounds like. You can tell that, you know, all those little EQ moves and multi-band compression goes a long way. Let me just quickly go over the master real quick. So first off, I am terrible with gain staging. Like I am bad at this. Every time I do mixes or I'm like writing music, my stuff is always peaking. It's always like multiple dB above 0. So I used a gain plugin before anything and just kind of, I lowered the gain enough so that we're consistently hitting like -6 dB or so. -8. But I'm basically like quite a bit below like 0. That's the main thing of that. And then I did a little bit of EQ, you know. Let's hear what it sounds like with no EQ on the master. Okay, and here's with the EQ. You know, just making up for some deficiencies. And then I did multi-band compression again. Kind of doing a little bit of compression in each band, but the main thing this is for the low end. You'll hear what this sounds like. So let me solo the low end. So here's the low end with no multiband. And then here's the multiband in. You can hear as like when the kick's hitting, the bass kind of ducks a little bit. I enjoy the way that sounds. It's nice and punchy. I used ozone for my limiting and stuff. I was getting to around -12 LUFS, which that's around where I like to be now. The original masters at like, I don't even know, it's incredibly loud. It's like -9 LUFS or something. I don't like to get super loud like that. I'm not good at mastering that loud, and it never sounds good. Here's without mastering again. And here's with the master. So yeah, hopefully that covered pretty much everything about the mix. I don't think I left out too much. It's hard to get to everything because I don't want to make this like an hour-long video where I'm talking to a camera. Like, I don't know if anyone's even gonna see this, so I don't want to waste too much time. But hopefully that gave you a good idea of what I did mixing this cover. Again, I'm not trying to sound exactly like Vildhjarta. I'm just trying to have some fun with it and add my little spin to things. But yeah, if anyone wants this, I might put my archetype Nolly presets up online or something for free. I don't know how to end these types of videos, but thanks for watching. If you like the mix, let me know. If you like what I did, let me know. If there's anything I missed and you want me to like fill you in on what happened there, then let me know. If you thought the mix sucked, let me know, because I mean, it's not the best mix in the world, so I'm open to feedback and criticism. So yeah, thank you for watching. Have a good day.